Okay, good morning, everyone. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone this morning. As we go through the overall competition process, we've added into the process the stage 3, which was a opportunity for the team to step back from their original proposal and reevaluate a certain number of elements that were addressed by the jury in their recommendation to City Council. And said earlier to the jury, working with the GGLO, Bernardo Will's team has been a joy from our perspective, and I think that we have developed a very good initial team-client relationship with the city that will last beyond the competition. So the agenda today, first of all, is for, let's go around and introduce ourselves of who we are, and then what we will do is turn the agenda over to GGLO, Bernardo Wills, to make their presentation. What we would like to do is the same format as the presentations earlier, that you have 45 minutes to make your presentation, allowing for 45 minutes of conversation with the jury following. It does not mean that the jury cannot kind of ask questions during the presentation, but I think for the most part, what we'd like to do is hear the full package and then come back and look at the details, if that's okay. So if we want to start out with the jury, would you please introduce yourself and your background? Han Mei, you want to start?
Sure. Good morning. Han Mei Chang. I am a project manager at Hoffman Construction, and a lot of my experience is in civic work and building downtowns. And my background is architecture.
Katie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Eglin Cox. I am the executive director here in Sandpoint of Kinnicksu Land Trust, a land conservation organization. I also bring with me a background working for 15 years in architecture as well, focused on community built projects.
Herb is on yet? No, same. Herb,
Nope.
Herb,
No Herb today.
Herb will eventually be here. We think he was kind of tied into some family things he couldn't get out of. Steve.
I'm Steve Gill. I'm with the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality Brownfields Program, Northern Area Brownfields Analyst. Been in that position for 18 years, so I work on a lot of different projects throughout the 10 northern counties of Idaho, working with cities and counties on redevelopment of properties. I was born and raised in Sandpoint, and my family actually first got to Sandpoint in 1886. So I have a long history of being in this community.
Brian?
Tatsmewi, good morning. My name is Brian McCormick. I'm an enrolled member of the Nez Perce tribe here in Idaho. I'm a landscape architect. I started my firm about 30 years ago in Portland. The majority of my work has been in the public sector and tribal sector, ranging from museums and cultural centers to housing and development.
Shelby, please.
Mayor Shelby Ronstadt of Sandpoint, concluding my second term here as Sandpoint's mayor. I've been in public service here for 15 years on the Planning and Zoning Commission, City Council, and I've been a small business owner here in Sandpoint for a couple of decades and have been active in development and asset management for the last 11, 12 years as well.
Rob, please.
Hey, everybody. My name is Rob. I resident here at Sandpoint, have a couple businesses. The Max Farm Productions, we put on events, mostly concerts here in town, including the Sandpoint Summer Series at Farm and Park. I also manage and run the Heartwood Center in Sandpoint, and father of a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So thanks everybody for all your hard work help putting together this for my kids to enjoy.
Karen, please.
Well, I hail from Portland, Oregon, and my experience includes marketing, where I was very interested and active in the real estate sector. Put together a public space little piece of business that was international, as it turned out. Activation activities associated with that, and started a bank somewhere along the way, a community bank. I'm currently the executive director of the Halpern Landscape Conservancy. Also, I've been the project manager of the restoration of the Keller Auditorium, which also strengthens a connection between the auditorium and one of the fountains in the Halpern Landscape connection of 4. I'm also now, because Portland needs to get out of the ditch, a partner in a lot of activities in city planning, and involved in the governor's task force and pulling Portland out of the ditch.
Great. Jennifer, you'd like to introduce yourself? And we all know you, but
Sure. Jennifer Stapleton, I'm the city administrator and have been project manager for this.
and my associate Jen.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Manhard, and my background and career has been in architecture and urban planning and design. And I have worked with Dawn for a long time on design competition management in cities all over America. And it's been a pleasure to work on this in this community.
Great. Let's then move on to and give the floor to the team.
All right.
Mark, you're going to start, and would you please introduce everyone, or have everybody introduce themselves, please?
Mark, jurors, just a reminder, if you could please mute yourself while the team is in their presentation, just so we can all hear. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Welcome from Boise, Idaho. We've got a couple of folks online. We'll spin through the room, and then we'll go to Julia and then Sarah in a moment here. So yeah, from our conference room in Boise, Mark Sindel, principal with GGLO.
Hi, I'm Josiah Brown. I'm an urban designer with GGLO.
Hi, I'm Phil Boyd. I'm the president of Welch Comer Engineers from Coeur d'Alene.
Samantha Jesser, urban designer with GGLO.
Morning, Del Hatch, landscape architect with Bernardo Wills, and proud native of Sandpoint.
Hi, everybody. Julia Culp, landscape architect with Bernardo Wills.
Hi, I'm Sarah Thompson Moore. I'm a artist working in public sculpture and site-specific design, and I grew up in Coeur d'Alene.
And missing is the professor?
Yes, missing is Professor Greg Moeller, sustainability specialist, and Aaron Plew, a local ecologist.
Yes, not necessarily missing. They've been with us all the way along and will continue to, but it's not here today.
Yeah, no, they kept showing up for meetings, no question.
Yeah.
So, Mark, I think what we'd like to do is give you 45 minutes or so to make a presentation, have your group make a presentation, allowing us 45 minutes at the end for conversation with the jury. So it's pretty much the format that we used in your original presentation. So the floor is yours, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, Don. All right. Can everyone see the screen okay? Don, give us a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. All right. So we've been very focused on your recommendations. So what we want to do is talk a little bit about what we've been up to the past month. And then we're going to go very deeply and specifically into the 13 recommendations. So high level, we had stage 3 workshop with the technical advisory group or committee, which was very productive. That was the beginning of the month. And then we are here today giving you an updated presentation. Then next week, and the dates are plus or minus a day, but next week we will be in front of council. So what have we been doing over the past month? It's been very enjoyable and productive and lots of work. Upon being selected, we actually had an internal design review with our entire firm to share ideas and see if there was anything, reactions, what we're missing, things to think about. This is something we do in kind of a studio setting as designers. And then one of our first meetings, which was very positive, was with the ZPD development team, the developer and their architects. We walked through overall intent. I think we collectively worked on some broader guidelines moving forward and goals to make sure everything's in keeping with the master plan. They were eager and willing participants. I think there were some positives that came out of that. And then we had on September 26th, an in-person workshop with city staff. I think Jennifer and Don and team, that was probably 5 hours straight of very productive conversation, going through almost every aspect of what we're going to show you today. And a lot of that fed into what we're going to review. Then we had a working session with Jerry Dicker and his development team and architect in his hotel in Spokane. Another positive meeting that gave us some insight on what he's thinking. And then we had a tribal engagement plan meeting. Again, another very positive and productive meeting. Sarah will share the results of that shortly here in the plan moving forward, which we're pretty excited about. And then with the city team and with KPFF's bridge specialist team, who we're proposing we add to the team after this stage, we had a feasibility strategy meeting with some options we're going to go through on how to meet some of the more practical ideas of a new bridge in an existing alignment. So we have some good tangible answers for that. And then we circled back with the city and had a productive historic preservation meeting just actually about a week ago. And then very productive meeting with city staff on implementation and phasing. So I think we have a really good handle of what the priorities are and what we're going to do after next week. So we're excited to share that. Of course, now we're going to focus on your 13 comments and recommendations specifically. This is directly from the competition. Here's the distilled down version of that. So we're literally just going to go one at a time in order, starting with the land use recommendations. All right, so let's jump in. So what you asked for was us to really look at more specific land use recommendations to help the city identify needed changes to its codes. A lot of that had to do with height, bulk, and massing, and then a cursory level look at design guidelines. In addition, we're looking at, as we talk about lighting with dark sky compliance a little bit later, also looking at what needs to happen after the publishing of this refined master plan. So we're going to get into a couple of these components. First off, we were looking at the overall zoning, and you see a couple lines on the page of note. One is this First Avenue core overlay zone that we're going to recommend be an additional level of guidance given the specific opportunities and challenges of that zone of historic buildings on one side at first, potentially several new buildings, and the bridge, so to speak, that they are to Sand Creek and to City Beach. The other one is the Granary District, which we talked about, and we think there's a real opportunity there. That's in the blue hatched area. So we're suggesting that there's an overlay zone there to perpetuate the identity and character of that district. And I guess another thing I want to say, going back to all this, is we talked quite a bit before about evolving Sandpoint and really doubling down on culture, identity, environment, art, and what the identity of Sandpoint is, not transforming the city, but evolving it to meet the growing needs of the community and for the future. So to that end, this is all about an evolution and honing in on those special characteristics that exist and bringing those forward. So that's one idea with these two overlay zones. And the other aspect with this is how this can be implemented so it actually happens over the next 20 years. And so we'll get into more with the historic district overlay zone, but this is a recommended line that's an evolution of some of the prior lines with some real intent. How do we protect the existing buildings by having them in this zone? And then how does the zone wind up doing two things? One, it's a mechanism to protect existing buildings. Two, for new and renovated buildings and streetscapes and public realm in this zone, it gives the framework to have discussions to make sure those are done with a sensitivity to that. So we'll get into that in a little bit as well. Overall, we think that the zoning is pretty solid, but there are some nuanced recommendations we want to make. So before we get into those, Josiah, do you want to add anything to what I was saying?
No, you got it. Got it all.
And I'll introduce this next piece, and Josiah will jump in once we get into some of the recommendations. So we did look at the existing zoning, and for the most part, paraphrasing, there's a 35-foot height limit in the zones, and then each allows varying degrees, 45 up to 65 feet of additional height, and when certain uses are added, residential, structured parking, and others. So in theory, we think this. Good. Go to the next. What we did do.
I'm sorry, Mark. Sorry to interrupt you. I was unclear what you said there at the end. In theory, what?
In theory, we think that works as an idea. We appreciate and think that that's the right way to go. Having bonus density for specific things like structured parking and housing. I think how much and how high, depending on location, is something we wanted to unpack a little bit. So we go to the next one. The idea is, let's just focus a little bit right now on First Street. So we have historic buildings on one side. We have the series of new buildings coming in on First, again, that are metaphorically a bridge to history and a transition to Sand Creek. And what we're honing in on with this study is trying to enable successful economic development of new buildings without really being an intrusion or a disruption on the context and core of your charming downtown, particularly with the historic buildings across the street. So what you're seeing here is a three-dimensional study and modeling of 65 feet in a full block, 45 feet in that full block. Again, this is First Street along Sand Creek across some historic buildings. What variable setbacks and view sheds would be so that we could assess that. So on the top, you see an aerial. In the middle, you see Church Street looking east, and then you see a view of Oak Street, and then you see First Avenue looking south. In assessing that, trying to straddle that line of not limiting development, we want development to happen, but not creating something that will be ill perceived by the community or we may regret. It became pretty clear to us on the right that a 55-foot height with setbacks of 35 feet provide a significant envelope for development, but aren't out of step or context with existing buildings. Economically, from the development standpoint, of course, the 65 feet is great, but as you saw some of those, which we can go back to during Q&A, it really is hard to see it working based on these studies. Now this, we feel like works pretty well. And so a couple things. So you see 35 feet of development with a step back at 35 feet, 20 feet, and then a height of up to 55 feet with the addition of some sort of portal or view corridor in the alignment of the street. And that's a place where There's street activating uses, retail, food and beverage can wrap those. And there could be a public accessible walkway through that and overlook out the other side with activating uses and spill out undercover. But that the goal is to be contextually sensitive while setting up ease of future development and creating view sheds. So this is the sort of the end point that we got to with this process, but we think the next process is distilling down guidelines. Some of this came out of our conversations with the developers. And the other side of this is Sand Creek, of course, and allowing, as we presented last time, development to extend out. And so the high level guidelines we talked about before were about following a little bit of the rhythm and scale and bulk and mass of the existing buildings with new materials that represent today. And this idea of these categories of timeless restoration, respectfully eclectic, and design-oriented contemporary, depending on whether this is an adaptive reuse of an existing building, an addition of an existing building, or a new building. So this helps set the goals moving forward. One of the recommendations we're going to make is that a more robust set of guidelines be developed for old and new buildings beyond the additional work that we've done. So I think you'll probably have some questions as we get into this. Do you want to add anything?
So I'll just add that those studies inform what we're recommending for that First Ave core overlay zone, would be these recommended zoning and design guidelines.
And then the guidelines that'll be in the final report, that's high level one pager, include using masonry and solid materials at the base, keeping design and the level of fenestration and modulation relatively simple to focus on the quality of the materials. So things along those lines. I think we want to avoid what we would call gingerbreading of new buildings. We'd rather have quality new buildings that are a future landmark or historic building because they're significant in how they concisely solve the problems of today. So through the guidelines, what we're not doing, we're not promoting a postmodernist recreation of a historic building. We think that diminishes history over time. We're also not trying to promote an over gingerbreading of a new building to make it look less bad. What we're promoting are simple, authentic buildings with quality materials that are representative of the uses and the challenges of today. There's a lot more to talk about with that and a lot more to develop, but that's the basic premise.
Mark, can you give me or give us an example of gingerbreading? I don't have a concept in mind of the difference there.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. That's a good question. So I'll describe it without going into any specific project, but you've probably all seen in your travels or even in Sandpoint, buildings that have 20 different materials on one facade, and they have a lot of 2 to 4 foot jigs and jogs, and they are busy with a lot going on, and not necessarily in a way that tracks back of an architectural expression of the use or purpose of the building, but more so as a way to break up a building to make it look less bad. So I don't know if describing that conjures up things in your minds that you've seen, as opposed to something that is elegant and sophisticated and simple, and there's a strong purpose, a meaningful purpose and depth behind each of the architectural decisions or expressions rather than merely aesthetic. I don't know if that helps.
I would also say that it's kind of decorated buildings that are trying to presuppose a earlier time or something like that, as opposed to being a very honest structure about time and place, but done in a very good context or dominant context.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. All right, so introducing this, and then Josiah is going to jump in, talk a little bit about historic preservation. This is critical, right? So high level, couple things. One, in working with the city, we want to make sure that any significant building that needs to be protected falls within the zone, which is not actually happening right now, the landmarks district. And then the second thing is to set up the district to do two things. One, be able to establish specific guidelines for protection, preservation, and in some cases, careful addition or renovation of those buildings that are existing and historic or contributing. And the second piece, equally as important, is the public realm and new buildings. Again, not to say that we're suggesting they're postmodernist, but public realm and new buildings go through this or within the district and have an extra level of review and discussion so that they're done with sensitivity to the existing buildings, much like the brief conversation we just had about the massing. So there's a dual purpose there that's important to distinguish. So with that, Josiah's going to jump a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, so we met with the city and just discussed sort of where we're currently at and what we'd like to see to get these buildings under actual protections. And so this is what we helped them come up with. And so you see that that smaller area within is the current historic district boundary, and looking at all of the different historic buildings within the downtown, we're recommending this broader red historic district boundary to encompass all of those. So that way these buildings listed here can be under historic protections that can be enacted by the city.
Then the idea there is if you are within the district and you have a historic building, there are more specific guidelines to be developed, and the Arts, Culture, and History Committee reviews it based on those guidelines. That's a follow-up thing that we need to do. And then if it is a new building within the district, then obviously that needs to be a new building, but it meets certain criteria of being sensitive to but not replicating historic buildings. So there's probably a layer of design review and an overlap with the Arts, Culture, and History Committee that needs to be an outgrowth of that. I think the other layer is that we're going to recommend that there are streetscape standards within the district that are established for your downtown that bring that together in the public realm that can be implemented both with public projects and with new development frontage improvements. So we'll probably leave it at that and get into the detail in Q&A.
Great. So now we're going to move to point 2, and the first one was a big one, so we'll move through these other ones a little bit quicker. But balancing ecology and human activity, I think there was a desire to see some more of the ecological improvements, providing also some human benefit. So we have focused here on the Sand Creek and City Beach areas. This is where we left you. And then this is some of the adjustments that we've made. So we've incorporated 3 kayak launches along Sand Creek, one at the top at the Cedar Street Terrace, here at Farm and Landing, and then also adding one down by the carousel, as this is an area with accessible parking. Then we've also been working to develop some ideas for sculptural berms that could help reduce sand migration and prevent wind from getting into City Beach. We're adding lawn and picnic areas incorporated into the meadow and the forest down towards the point. And then also making sure that we preserve trees along the beachfront to provide that shade and windbreak.
And the concept of berms came up in the discussion when we met with the city in one of our workshop presentations, and the idea of, are there ideas where we could mitigate the sand migration during the winter months and the high winds. So we talked about sculpting some berms near the shoreline, using native plantings on the windward side, and a concept of, is there an opportunity, these berms facing the pavilion or the large green at City Beach, opportunities to give them a little bit of a sculptural feel to them, maybe even possibly some seating. And then the arrangement upper right of how they're oriented and how they can help deflect some of the winds and help promote the, maintaining the sand versus the mitigation.
So next, you asked us to look at diversity of housing and considering workforce housing. So we want to get into that briefly. So a couple things. What we have on here is a half-mile or 10-minute walk radius in your downtown. And what we've found and what we're recommending here is that a percentage of workforce housing within a walking distance of your downtown, particularly considering the composition of downtown Sandpoint, is critical to support the service industry from an equity and the sustainability standpoint. Really just kind of clearly stated, we rely on a strong workforce for our daily functioning and during tourism season, and taking the baseline of our workforce and pushing them to spend health, safety, and resources to drive in snow and sleet and dodge animals miles away for housing is just not sustainable and not equitable. So the first take at this was what opportunities are there to provide a baseline? The goal would be 200 units within this area. So we looked at a couple sites to get there. You're all aware of many of these things, but we do think, although we have to be careful not layering too much on to the city parking lot, that there's an opportunity, if it can work along with the parking economically, to include that's an opportunity that should be looked at. There's the site in the Granary District that you're well aware of that has opportunities underway. And then there's the site just at the northern edge of the boundary, number 3, which is a significantly sized site that has strong opportunities. So we're thinking with those 3 sites specifically, there's an opportunity to try to achieve that 200-ish number. That's based on a fair amount of experience and working in similar cities. If we want to get analytical with this, we would recommend a study on workforce housing citywide and for your downtown to vet that number, but I think it was a pretty logical first take. Some of the other sites we did talk to developers, as you saw through the process, and it's a little bit of a push. What we found is market rate housing is private sector led, and of course we want to promote and get that. Deed restricted and affordable housing is often nonprofit and agency-led. Workforce is really where the partnerships between city urban renewal specifically and private development has a lot of opportunity. So that's led to looking at these 3 sites.
And I'm sorry, let me ask for clarification there. You're estimating that the appropriate number within that zone is about 200 workforce housing units?
Correct, Mayor.
And tell me again what that's based on?
That's based on experience working in similar sized cities, kind of going bottom up and top down from what's available site-wise, and what feels good. Right. I think we're probably not too far off, but if we want to get more analytical, which we would recommend you might want to do, we on other similar situations, we've added team members with specialty in creating study and analysis to more analytically come up with those numbers, and probably as importantly, what the right bedroom count is within that. What's the right mix to serve the workforce? Is it studios? Is it 2 bedrooms? Is it a mix? Or are we talking family? So intuitively, we've done enough of this that we have a good idea, but I would recommend one of the follow-up items is to commission a brief study to vet some of this.
Thank you.
So then a next point of clarification is the bicycle circulation, especially identifying how bikes connect into downtown from the Long Bridge, and then what happens along the Oak Street corridor. So this is what we had when we last presented to you, and so we've added some clarification here. Those dark blue lines are showing shared paths where both pedestrians and bicyclists are sharing the same pathway. The green dashed lines are dedicated for cyclists, and then those yellow dotted lines are the boardwalks and trails that are just for pedestrians. And so if we look at then how that applies to bicycles, here we're just trying to create connectivity across from the trails on the west side to the waterfront trails. And so making it really clear for a biker, if they're coming in down off the Long Bridge, how they could stay on a protected lane, this solid line all the way through to Bridge Street. And then here at this point, because First Ave is traffic calmed, we are proposing that that would become a shadowed lane where bicyclists would ride in the lane with vehicular traffic. And then the other additions that you're seeing here are, these are buffered bicycle lanes, which would be their own designated area within the paved right of way. And so that is providing an alternative from down 3rd Ave and Church Street. And then also this neighborhood connection down Lake Street, coming in and connecting to that Sandpoint Dover Community Trail.
That's great. A quick question on that. I just want to verify, I'm sure you verified with staff that there's the width on 2nd Avenue to accommodate that buffered bicycle lane connecting Oak to Bridge Street or Church Street there on 2nd.
Yes.
Is there the width necessary there?
I think we're actually showing that on 3rd Avenue here.
Oh, thank you.
But yes, I think that would go
It
in
definitely is on 3rd. Okay.
with the new public parking lot redevelopment.
Thanks.
All right, so then next, we also wanted to provide some more information on the urban tributary cross sections, just to give you guys a better idea of what that looks like. And also some specific questions about the plantings here. So I think Mark and Sam can tell you more about that.
Yeah, and Sam's gonna go through piece by piece, but if we go to the plan, the overall idea is to have a cultural and environmental placemaking, education and interpretation feature that brings the rewilding idea right through the core of your downtown and sets you up to support the many, many events that you have and really be able to teach and educate in those larger events folks about the basic ethos and history of Sandpoint. So Sam's going to walk you through the system, and then we're going to get into specifics for each one, and then we'll talk about the planting at the end.
Right, okay, so we'll start at City Beach. So this is the most wild interpretation of the urban tributary. And then as you move through into downtown, where you see number 2, that's an area where it becomes a raised planter, an area for protection for the pedestrians from the vehicles, an area of raised planters for harvesting. And then as you turn the corner onto First Ave, this is an in-the-ground planting bed area, again for pedestrian separation from the vehicles and to keep that path flowing. And then as you go to 4, 5, and 6, when you get to the Oak Street event corridor, this is an area with slowed traffic, larger raised planting beds, more areas for harvesting as it's more areas for gathering spaces for these events that Mark touched on. So now we'll see those in section.
And just what you'll see here is a mix of paving, lighting, planting, and seeding with art and cultural and indigenous interpretation all wrapped into this piece, and it undulates and varies as it moves through the system that Sam is describing.
So at City Beach, you get a bioswale condition where you have the opportunity to manage the quality and quantity of stormwater here. Again, it's this more wild approach, and it's shared with an urban tributary multi-use path for bikers and pedestrians as you move through City Beach. Bridge Street, you're coming off of the bridge into downtown looking at First Ave. Here you have a property line adjustment with the current landowner. So you'll see in the next one you have gained 12 feet here, and that gives us opportunity for a much larger sidewalk experience with new development. Trying to have that active storefront at the ground level, how you can integrate outdoor seating, and then here you see that raised protected urban tributary planter, where we think during the festival or the events that go along with this harvesting of the flower can actually happen.
So just a distinction there, we're thinking that this is CAMS 30% in intense areas mixed with a bunch of other stuff we'll get into shortly. And there are areas where that may actually be harvested in a demonstration and in an interactive sequence. And where that happens, it's raised for more of a cultivated bed and for ease and protection of that to happen.
And then as you move to first ave, this is the current condition. So keeping the existing sidewalk curb lines, but incorporating with new development the urban tributary in the planting form, but still keeping the integration of art, the seating, and the lighting along the way. And then as you get to the Oak Street event corridor, this one as it is a calmer street now, as it is now a place of events where it flows down the street, use the sidewalks more as plazas. You see the bike lane go here, and then one side of where the parallel parking is. This parking counts will be accommodated in the new parking garage site that you'll see in a second, and you've seen on the maps. But here again is the raised planting and the wide multi-use path. And then share rows here, so if the bikers don't want to be on the multi-use path, traffic will be common enough that they can use the travel lanes as share rows. And then as you move further up the Oak Street event corridor, at the plaza, you see where the new mixed-use development comes in, changing both sides of the curve here. You have a lot of excess room at this place where we're proposing a larger plaza space. And this is where you see a lot of raised planters, plaza outdoor seating, event space, again, the multi-use pathway come through, planted curb bulbs, and then again, you see art, lighting, all that layered in. And then what you've seen before, how it not ends, but then goes to this point of Farming Park. We think Farming Park, here it's showing it as an in-the-ground planting bed, but it'd be sort of a mix here as this really exciting destination along the urban tributary to go with that.
Okay, so let's get briefly in the streetscape hierarchy.
If I might, Mark, sorry, I'd like to point out the jury, but it's very interesting to me, looking at the work that has been done on the urban tributary, is that there are clues within these that begin to inform potential development along the edge. So if you see a lot of those, it's beginning to set a framework for what those private developments might be along the way, which then as design guidelines were more fully developed could be a part of that. But it serves many purposes, not just a tributary, but also to inform the surrounding area.
Yeah, very good point, Don. Thank you. And part of the intent for sure. All right, streetscape hierarchy. So we've referenced this before. One of our recommendations moving forward is to develop streetscape standards for lighting, paving, planting, just a general upgrade for the core downtown area. And it could be that the landmarks or the historic district is the boundary of that. Within that, specifically to address your question about lighting. So we look at this, and given the condensed nature of City Beach to the Granary District and in between being very condensed, and the lake, we're thinking that all of this really needs to be subtle and accented and as dark sky compliant as possible, which is another reference you rightfully made in an earlier recommendation. So a couple things. City Beach, the idea is it is low level accent lighting for wayfinding, but we're very intentionally keeping this subtle to protect nature and the night sky. The urban tributary is a whole thing with its own lighting approach that would cut through that. And then we have the seasonal features, the ribbon, and other things, the carousel that would be beacon light that would have their own lighting associated and would be beacons or draws in the winter. But again, for City Beach, it's very low-level dark sky compliant approach. As we get into Sand Creek, the idea is that we highlight the bridges, both old and new, and really we carry that blue light idea forward, and then there's accent blue light LED strips or cove lighting as a glow. Sarah will talk more about that subsequently here. And then there are projection art and other things that happen that are specialty to Sand Creek. And then as we get into downtown proper, outside of the urban tributary, the idea is to really bring forward the quintessential resort and wintertime experience where we have new standards for street trees. And I know you do some of this, but every street tree in that zone has a light receptacle for festival lights wrapping it. We look at what we've done in other similar areas, create down lighting to accent all of the historic buildings, particularly the masonry or brick buildings. And then we look at a new comprehensive dark sky compliant ornamental headlight that bridges between historic and waterfront as a standard for downtown. So it's subtle. There's an amenitization, and it brings to bear historic buildings, protection of natural dark sky, and the notion of the urban tributary or the blue necklace as a specific piece.
Yeah, and I could just add a little bit there, Mark, that particularly with the urban tributary, I would be working with a lighting designer to kind of establish a very subtle and basic infrastructure for the lighting, but one that's also customizable over time, and that we can, as Sandpoint grows and changes in the artwork and the storytelling evolves, this allows us the opportunity to add elements, change some elements over time, and really start to think of the urban tributary as a storytelling element that could potentially change seasonally or in different ways for different events.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, you see some images that represent what we're talking about. So we can get back into this in more detail in Q&A, but you get the idea. And let's move on then to seasonal activation.
All right, so here we were looking to provide some more ideas of seasonal activation of the area, especially in the off season in the winter. So we had some fun working with the city to kind of develop these ideas of other activities and events that could happen essentially in the non-summer months. And so you're seeing that represented here, ideas about evening light shows happening along Sand Creek, or even incorporating along the entire urban tributary, the Camas Festival in the spring, a holiday stroll or Christmas market in the winter, fat tire biking and Nordic skiing along some of the trails along the waterfront, and then down at City Beach, of course, ice skating, a potential ice sculpture festival, opportunities for campfire and s'mores, snowman building contest, also coming up with some fall activities like a Andre paddle.
You're back. We lost you there for about 30 seconds.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay. I'll just pick up where I left off. So we worked to come up with some different seasonal activities represented here in the different areas of the downtown. Then we also spent some time looking specifically at Sand Creek. And so I think you guys have seen this. We know it's a very active place in the summer. And so then we've also thought about what it could become in the winter.
Yeah, and this is where the lighting concepts can really come into play with seasonal light shows that happen at certain times in the winter that could really be a draw for Sandpoint during the winter. And so this image starts to kind of talk about some of those opportunities. We spoke about art projections on the back of the Panada Theater. We would be looking at methods that would create subtlety of light that really interacts with the environment that's presented at Sand Creek in the winter, such as the mud flats being kind of a dark canvas that light can we can project shadow patterns onto, or the light can pick up the textures of the mud flats and bounce off of the reflections in the water that's existing. Potentially working with lighting elements casting downward from within the trees that would create shadow patterns on the ground, lighting under the bridges, highlighting those bridges like we spoke about earlier, but really just creating a really interesting environment to explore during the winter through light and nature.
Great. Then another point that we wanted to clarify is the city beach circulation. And so we've been working very hard to try and meet some of those concerns.
So this drawing is what we presented to you folks during our last presentation. You had some concerns about orientation and understanding of how people would negotiate the access to the launch, the distance of boat trailers from the launch. As we oriented the parking in a north-south orientation for both the beachgoers and the boaters parallel to each other. And there was concern about somebody driving in here, getting mixed up with our launch activities and no way to get out. And the safety of people crossing through the parking lot as it was oriented in that fashion, some of the big ones. We were also asked to look at the number of parking stalls, the number of boat slips, and things like that. So we took a look and went back and revisited it a little bit. What you see now is beach, car parking on the north side, the boat trailer parking on the south side, both of them oriented now east and west. The orientation as people would move into the beach area from below the byway and the railroad, and an immediate orientation and traffic calming happening here with the immediate right being an access down to the launch area. You can see that we've added a turnaround at this point. We have prepping lanes here and tie down lanes there. So as people come and then they leave, they can get out of the lanes of traffic. We've added some handicap parking here for the marina area through here. Currently, we show 38 stalls in the boat trailer section, which is an addition of 5 over your existing. A major pedestrian collector from both the boat trailer and the car parks, east-west, moving you directly to the city beach area. 245 car parks here, which is the count that we have existing at City Beach. Arguably, there may be a little bit more paving on this plan than what you have today, but this is organized and more efficient the way the parking is set up, and it also attempts to incorporate what might be new landscape ordinances for your parking lot and storm drainage, etc. So boat trailers immediately come in. You can also access the city beach parking from that access, but then at this point, there's a left that takes you to the hotel, a right that takes you directly into the city beach car parking. That has extended this entry plaza slightly more to the west. Everything flows now easterly to the main park elements where we still retain the ice ribbon. And the real critical thing about City Beach overall is this continuous connection of the blue ribbon urban tributary that takes you all the way to the point and the celebration of rewilding this area of the beach. We've also, at the city's request, explored and added another restroom location up here that could serve activities near the hotel and entry plaza, the traditional family beach activities, and the nature play area here. One thing you'll see that we have not included is the recommendation that the city considers removing the existing snack shack in this area. Opens up and connects the green all the way to the beach and the swim dock area. It would require a new location for the lifeguard area, which we would incorporate within the pavilion. And lastly, the Harbor House shifted from this location to this location. We have some parking along the railroad, and we still maintain the non-motorized ADA launch in this area.
Yeah, go ahead.
And you guys can hear us okay. I think our camera froze, but you can
Yeah.
still.
Okay. I'm sorry. Is the question the can pedestrian or multimodal connection across from the southwest of the boat parking lot to the east?
No, that's not the question.
Okay.
So the concern would be the trailer spaces aren't pull through. So is that pedestrian path between the parking lot just a painted pathway, or is that a curbed pathway? Because that seems like that could create quite a problem for trailers to have to back in that area. And then second concern would be the area of the beach where the new hotel is going to be, that handicap parking in that area. Some people park right along that waterway and can now have a struggle to get to the beach at the distance it is. And it looks like we're increasing that distance for them. So those are just some thoughts I had by looking at that.
You're correct. The way we have it laid out right now, about half of the boat trailer stalls are back-end stalls there on the north. Those are all pull-throughs from either direction through the center. And you see a few back ends down on the southern edge of that. Ideally, I think that that pedestrian crosswalk would be a little bit wider. Ideally, we have a little bit of buffer on it, and indeed we may have to add some landscape buffer to it just to accommodate some storm collection and drainage treatment through there. But it is designed to be a raised crosswalk through that area. The entire bank on the most eastern edge of the parking is set up as handicap parking right through that area, right through there. So it kind of serves as a central point for beachgoers as handicap parking. And then we've designated handicap parking in that area where the cursor is now, and some handicap parking over on the far left area in the south near our non-motorized ADA accessible launch.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize. Just a reminder for those out there, this Q&A is for the jury, and was happy to accommodate the counselor. I know she's passionate, but we won't make further exceptions. I have another question about the multimodal or pedestrian connection from the southwest corner of the boat parking, under the boardwalk that goes under the trestle there. And then it looks like, yep, but as you're moving east, it's a little unclear to me how that connects over across to the park. So it looks like you just traverse east there, and then I don't see a crosswalk there or anything, but I assume that.
Yeah, you're correct. You would traverse east. Where the cursor is now is almost more of a pedestrian plaza that fronts the marina and the harbor house. Continuing east would be a crosswalk, raised crosswalk, speed table, if you will, calm the traffic and slow the traffic. And we even talked with the city about the potential in the future of the need for even the possibility of a control arm there, so that cruisers and people just driving through the area don't congregate near the launch or end up at the launch and cause a little bit more chaos with traffic. Signage, obviously, wayfinding will be important, but there may be an actual need for physical control in allowing people to access the launch at that point. One thing I failed to also note that we've added at the city's request is on the edge of the existing, or of the proposed tennis courts, we would add 4 pickleball courts.
Okay, anything else on the city beach circulation before we move on?
I guess I had assumed we were supposed to wait until the end to ask questions, but so I'm
Yeah.
just like stocking them up. Is that okay? Or would you rather
Your
ask them
choice.
now? Okay,
Go.
I'll wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, Don, if it's, and we're happy either way, if it's okay, we'll go for about another 10 minutes and then we'll wrap it up and before you open it to Q&A. But if anyone has any burning question that we need to get to, jump in like you've been doing. Does that sound good, Don?
Yeah, I think so. I think you should proceed and try to get your whole agenda out and then we can come back to questions, specific questions.
Okay.
All right, so next we'd like to talk about the First Ave Phase 3 downtown revitalization efforts and if we're showing anything that's different from the current city plans.
So I'm going to tackle this one. What you see on the screen right now is the excerpts from the multimodal plan. The image on the left is kind of the short-term plan, and it shows Pine going to two-way with a new signal at Fifth and Pine, in that 2 or 3 block section, and then Bridge Street, a little bit of a change there that we're actually showing something similar in our presentation. On the right-hand side, you see the long-term solution, which had the intersection at First and Bridge being closed. So it's just, you could only make the right into the bridge or left out. But that has been determined by the city to be not viable, so we don't show that one anymore. South of Pine, one of the things that we had looked at in this illustration, it kind of shows the same configuration that's there now, which is a 3-lane configuration, northbound, southbound, and a turn bay, and then signal at Pine and First, and then a signal at Superior and First. As we were working through the process with the city, we heard that there's this strong desire to extend the downtown south to Superior, and then also as part of the bike and pedestrian connection that Josiah had earlier, there's a desire to make that connectivity. So in this next image, you can see there's a signal at Fifth, the First and Pine still, but we believe, and this is all subject to doing a traffic modeling to confirm this, that there may be an opportunity to remove the left turn bay and reduce the street cross section between Pine and Superior from 3-lane to 2-lane. And then once that happens, it gives you opportunity to create a protected buffered bike path and a pedestrian corridor through there, and also perhaps does the blue necklace get an extension on it, or there's opportunity to green that space up. But now you're extending downtown further south to Superior. We've also took a quick look at modeling a roundabout at Superior and First Street, because that would obviously be a nice entrance. It slows traffic. You can move trucks through it, although we've heard comments from city staff that there's a strong desire to reduce the amount of truck traffic on Pine Street to make it more of a local street. And so again, a little bit of study would have to happen there. But this opportunity, if you remove the 3 lanes on First and take it to 2, you have that pedestrian bike connection, gets down to Superior. Superior is very wide. It has a lot of right of way in it, and we could extend the shared use path back to the trailhead and actually connect into the Long Bridge connection to the south. There would be a connection south to the Condo del Sol, so those folks could get across. Probably there's enough right of way on the south side to put a path on the south side as well. So just a more emphasis on bike and pedestrian connection in that direction, and then also to the neighborhoods to the south and to the west in that area. So those are the deviations, we'll call them, that we see from the current multimodal plan. We believe that they're feasible, but of course there would need to be some traffic modeling to confirm that.
Can you go back to that and just, for our sake, just follow your cursor as you're coming into town, as if you're going to come up and go west on Pine and then move out of town too for us.
Are you in a car or on a bike?
We're in a car.
In a car. So you're coming into town. If you're headed southbound on 95, you come down here, you head through here, you just go through the roundabout here. This roundabout is actually configured so it can handle a highway truck. But they would have to move very slowly through it, which is a way of discouraging truck traffic. Then as you come up here, you're continuing on up to Pine Street. There's a signal here, and then you would turn left and head over to Highway 2.
Okay, great. And just do the same in the reverse if you're going the other direction.
So if you're going the other direction, you're headed, well, let's say you're going southbound on 95. You come here, there's a signal. Once you get the green, you turn south here. You go around the roundabout like that, and then head on out of town.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh. Touch it.
So we talked about the bridge. When we visited with you last, we talked about the importance of Sandpoint being recognized as a community with some very unique bridges. You talked, and this is the plan that we presented to you that had some separation between the vehicles and the pedestrians. You heard Mark mention that Phil and him have discussed with KPFF the logistics of the bridge construction, the materiality, et cetera, and I'll let Phil walk you through some of those thoughts.
So the discussion we had with KPFF's bridge engineer focused on kind of the feasibility, timing, and money, which are always important features. And so we ended up looking at 3 different scenarios, and one of them is the first one would be a staged construction, which has a longer time frame and costs more. The idea is to use the pedestrian bridge, which would be new, but design it in a way that it can handle traffic initially, probably a single lane of traffic going either in or out to the City Beach side. And then the bridge would be done in stage construction. So you build half the bridge while the other one, the existing bridge is still there. And then you demo that half of the existing bridge and build the second half of the bridge. So that's one option. It takes longer, it costs more money. So then we looked at the scenario of can we get temporary exits off of 95 that would come down the railroad access road, the depot access road, and perhaps develop a one-way configuration in and a one-way configuration out, which this does cut the traffic time down. The challenge with it is you're working with ITD to get temporary access off of 95, which can be challenging. And then the third option would be to do a complete new realignment of the bridge, which obviously this shows a realignment coming off of Church, which would be really great, but it goes through a piece of private property, which is presumptuous, and we don't intend to be presumptuous like we're going to go acquire this property, but it is a idea that came up and we thought it was worthwhile presenting because it allows you to just completely build the new bridge on a new alignment, and then demo the old bridge. Or the idea we had was to turn the old bridge into the pedestrian bridge because it may be unsuitable currently for vehicle traffic for 25 years, but the pedestrian traffic load is obviously much lower, so it could be converted into a pedestrian bridge, the existing one, but still very kind of we don't want to be presumptuous about the private property deal, but we thought it was worthwhile showing this to the jury.
So then we also wanted to provide some more details on the phased implementation. And so we went back and did a workshop with the city to clarify what we had shown previously through this kind of 3-phase 20-year plan. And we've adjusted it to now be a 4-phase, each phase broken down into 5-year increments, taking us through the 20-year timeline.
Yeah, just briefly, for the interest of time, we can get into more detail during Q&A, but working closely with Jennifer in the city and with Phil on the urban renewal funding side, we basically have some early wins. So some of the streetscape enhancements going south initially, Farming's Landing enhancements, and some of the Sand Creek Boardwalk extensions, obviously the city parking lot redevelopment. Those are some of the initial pieces. Then we have this sort of mid-range focused quite a bit on in Farming's Park and the event corridor and some of the key pieces of the urban tributary. We get into in 10 to 15 years the new bridge, which works with when there needs to be investment in the existing. And then we get into some of the bigger items in phase 4 further out 15 to 20 years, including the ice ribbon event pavilion and some of the more involved pieces. So again, we can circle back during Q&A to as much of this as you want, but we'll get into the last few and wrap things up.
Then just addressing some of the things that were missing from our last round. So we have incorporated the missing kayak launches to make sure that those are incorporated into the next plan. We've stretched down the streetscape improvements to incorporate the phase 4 downtown revitalization efforts. We've added restrooms to serve the plaza area at City Beach, as well as incorporated the lifeguard shack area into the pavilion building, and then also addressed parking and circulation concerns. And then finally, already getting start on consulting with the tribes and working on that plan. Some development there. We had a kickoff meeting that Sarah can tell you more about.
Yeah, so we're really excited to dive in to deeper collaboration with the Kalispel tribe as we move forward with this plan. And as Josiah mentioned, we've already kind of got the ball rolling and started developing what our engagement team would look like. We have representatives from the city. We have several representatives from the Kalispel tribe. Francis Kaluuya, the cultural director. We have biologists and outreach coordinators for the Kalispel tribe, as well as the director of language, all on board with formulating these concepts with us. And we've kind of determined what that's going to look like in terms of we've identified what stages in this design process are going to need that initial meetup meeting of minds to kind of vet everything and make sure that everybody's on the same page and all of our goals are being met. And we're excited to kick that off with a meeting on site here soon with the whole team, where we walk all of these areas in question and we just really kind of brainstorm ideas together and kind of begin that process anew with a more close collaboration.
Yeah, and in closing, I think there has been an initial review of the plan and there's excitement and optimism about it. So I think we're off to a really positive start. Obviously, we have to earn trust and have it unfold, but I think we have a really strong start to that. So that wraps it up. Thanks for your patience. Let's continue to deep dive into Q&A. But so back to Don, you and the jury.
Okay, thank you. And as I think the jury can see, we've got a team that really takes comments and works them in such a way that they are trying to clarify an overall vision of what this plan could be. And as far as working it with the city and city staff, I think that for the most part it's workable. It isn't the final answer in a lot of ways, but it is a tremendous kind of plan to start building from, a framework, if you will, of other things. So I guess the way I would like to spend the last, I guess we ran a little bit over, but the last half hour of this is I'd like to go through the jury and have each of you just give comments or questions that you might have, and let's keep everything as concise and compact as we can. Han-Mei, you first.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you. This helps, continue the story, and I really appreciate all the visuals and descriptions. Some of this might feel a little nitty-gritty because we're at that detail stage, right? Some feedback on the broader historic district guidelines. I like how you're pulling that a little bit wider and capturing more things. I do think there is a sensitivity to the existing buildings that needs to make sure is considered and not lost. An example of that is even myself, when I purchased my house that I live in, I wasn't in a historic district, then it became a historic district, and then there's all these like layers of things that are now required. So just to make sure that it doesn't become inhibitive to actually make change and update buildings and windows and even some of those small things, because that can be cost prohibitive for residents or businesses. I love that you have taken that walk radius and put the affordable housing piece right in the middle, so they're not on the periphery of the walking radius in the business district that you're noting. I do want to challenge you a little bit more to see, is there a way to do affordable housing mixed in with mixed market rate, because it could be perceived that all the market rate gets the great view on the water and then the affordable housing piece is in the middle. So is there a happy medium there, or some way to integrate both together? Thank you for touching upon the dark sky compliance and noting where the lighting guidelines are throughout the city, and touching upon all the different areas that are special and how they're catered and styled to start to identify where the different districts are and kind of what the specialty pieces are there. I also appreciate the work that has done to kind of reorganize the circulation around City Beach. I think that is positive and further refined. It makes a lot of sense to me. But again, I don't use those areas, so I would be curious to hear how the locals, what the local jury members have to say. The roundabout solution at First Avenue is interesting. It caught my attention. As someone that doesn't drive in the snow a lot and going around roundabouts in the snow, I know that can be a little dicey when it becomes icy. So that was my only concern there.
Only at high speeds.
Well, yeah. I've slipped around a roundabout in a 4-wheel drive car in the dead of winter, going slow. So, but that's the Californian in me, maybe. Thanks for taking a look at different options on the bridge. I think that gives us a lot to consider and talk through on what makes sense. And then I think my last comment is, I appreciate the way you've approached the phasing, broken in those down to 4 phases and integrated a little bit more of like easy to do items. How do you set the stage and start to have action happen that are at measurable impacts for each 5-year increment?
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Aunt May. Katie?
Great. Just want to commend you on all. I can tell the depth of work you've done since leaving us last time, and I'm grateful for all the time that you've put in for our sweet town. Some questions, just following up, and I think through Hanmay's question, I answered this, but just looking at that historic district, your recommendation is to create guidelines for both commercial and residential within this zone?
Yes.
Okay, great. Moving on to the balance, ecological and human activation space. I really liked the idea of the sculptural berms to protect the sand. I'm curious if this is something that you have seen elsewhere. I really loved I think there's a lot of opportunities within City Beach to change the way the opportunities for sitting and enjoying the space. And I really liked this added to what you've already created, but I'm just curious, have you seen this used successfully before?
Not exactly in this configuration. The berming and the sculpting of the the mounds, yes, to deflect winds and such. But the seating was an opportunity that we thought might be applicable for the large green on the park as it faces activities that might happen at the performance venue, or simply if somebody's strolling through the park and had an opportunity to rest.
So your thought is as the winter winds come and pick up the sand, that it will hit the berms and stop at the berms, and then they can push it back when spring comes back into the beach?
Theoretically, yes.
Okay. I was curious on workforce housing. Just, I know that you've just done that. We have that sketch. And so in terms of the workforce housing in these areas that you've highlighted, are you seeing that vision for being owned or rented property?
Yeah, good question. So we were the first take of this is rented at some defined percentage, whether that's 80 to 120, below 100, 80 to 140. These are all real world examples we've used, but the intent is rental, yes. Then the next level, once you get a baseline of rental workforce housing within walking distance of your downtown, would be look at transitional or ownership as well. But this first take is rental just to get that first baseline going.
Okay. The next question I have is going to be a little bit more convoluted, and it sort of it includes number 4 and number 5, the bicycle circulation. So I always try to put myself in the mind of, let's say, a 6th grader coming down on their bike into downtown, trying to get to the beach and then trying to get home from the beach. And I think between, and you can correct me, I may be wrong because we looked at these so quickly, but my question is, it seems like there's a really, the issue may be the transition between the way in which you travel along these paths. So I saw, as a bike travel down, you're potentially on a multi-use path, then you're jumping into the road for a sharrow, then you're jumping back to a multi-use or sharrow, back to shared pathways. So I'm just thinking is like, and I may be wrong, but as you leave Bridge Street, it seemed Bridge Street was a multi-use path where the bike and the pedestrian are together. Then you turn right, onto First Avenue, which now you've moved from a path into the road. And now as you turn left, you have a choice either to stay in the road or be on the path. And then as you go up Oak Street, you're back on shared path. Can you maybe use the sections to walk me through, just as I'm thinking about, if a child is going to be able to figure out how to move from the pathway to the road to the pathway, and again doing that sort of in the reverse. I realize that you have you're attempting, if they come down Oak, you're attempting to make it easy for them to turn right on 3rd and then turn I have to get on my bike left and then back into Bridge Street. But do you understand the complexity of like moving between road and pathway and how that can be difficult?
Yes, I think Julie noted the idea when you jump into these very traffic controlled streets where it's all special paving and it's naturally traffic calm and safe and no one's going quickly, is that it's a natural, it's almost like one big mixed bike path. That's the thinking. But given your point, I mean, we could look at making that a contiguous thing. It just felt a little strange going into a really amenitized, slow, quote unquote, street to have a fully protected bike lane, and whether that would even be used. But I do understand, what you're saying about the intuitive nature of it. I think if we go back to the sections a little bit, like you said, and click through maybe Oak Street, it probably feels more intuitive than it sounds, but I think your point is well taken, and we need to continue to look at making this intuitive and seamless and not too complex. Particularly, you know, to your point about a sixth grader trying to navigate this.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I find when I'm on my bike a lot and if I jump, you know, it's very unpredictable for drivers when I jump from a sidewalk to and historically, you know, we haven't been able to be on the sidewalk. So I'm just trying to make sure that like the multi-use pathway is designed across Bridge Street for the bike and the walker to be together.
Yeah, not to make it more complex, but on Bridge Street, we have striped bike lanes. So it's buffered for folks who want to just cruise right through and over the actual vehicular bridge, the striped bike lanes there. And then the idea with the pedestrian boardwalk bridge that peels off and comes across is that's the multi-use path. And that probably you imagine an adult on a road bike that wants to move pretty quickly is going to just stay on Bridge Street, and the sixth grader is going to peel off onto the boardwalk or the multi-use path that peels off of the roadway.
Okay, great. Yeah. So just, yeah, put yourself into a few minds and figure out, figure out the easiest way to, because this has always been, I think, a huge challenge for our kids is they want to get to City Beach, and how do we get them there really safely with all the congestion that happens downtown? I really liked the thought that you had on lighting of Sand Creek in the wintertime. I could see that really bring people down into that space for that experience. I think about, I mean, it's much more holiday oriented, but Brian, you in Lewiston and the light show that they do in Lewiston, how many people come downtown in Lewiston, Idaho for that light show? And I like that it's not holiday oriented, but instead can be an experience that people can have after going to dinner downtown and then taking a nice walk down here. So I really like where you guys are going with that. And the only other thing that or two things, one is sort of a crazy idea that I will give to you, but the first one is that I really, I would love to see more, and this is in regards to City Beach. I really appreciate where you were able to take that in terms of the pedestrian paths and parking, and it's a complex little zone. So, but I would encourage you to think still further about how to potentially activate some of that passive landscape. And I think about things like just small wooden platforms that sort of sit just a little bit higher than the beautiful native plants that you've put in order to allow people to have, again, sort of looking to your rock, just different types of seating arrangements as they're enjoying City Beach. And they might not want to be on the sand, and they might really want just a really quiet spot to lay in the sun, read a book. And so thinking about how we, because I know the community, it worries a little bit about taking space away, but I appreciate the nature that you've brought into this space in order to, eliminate more lawn for the geese, trying to help us solve that issue, but also to really bring nature back into this space. So just thinking about more passive ways to get people into that landscape and experiencing this beautiful space that you guys have created. The only other crazy idea that I had that is pretty crazy, but just in thinking about, I've been in a space where the teens really enjoyed sort of that same thing you explored with the berms, the rock sitting. And we have this pier that's off screen here, but it's part of the boat launch. And I always thought about, like, if you could make a connection between City Beach somehow, maybe using this little boardwalk that you have that goes out into the water, but instead connecting it to that point, then you might be able to activate those rocks as hangout and sitting space for yet just and again, making that connection between the berm rock space. And yes, you'd have to be high enough in order to get the sailboats under, but you know what? We're creating visions here. So I'm just you don't have to take it, but I always thought that space is it's a space that could use activation and is really, and I saw it done in Geneva, and it was really interesting to see how many people just, and also in Burlington, Vermont, how many people enjoy just going down and sitting on warm rocks in front of the water. That's all I have.
Hey, thank you, Katie. We are at time, but I'm just going to continue on the same format that we have going right now. The jury is is committed to this time as well. So for any of the public that is watching, we're just going to continue on the jury session with comments and questions. So Steve, please.
Overall, I was really impressed with the attention to detail of our comments. When we had fairly extensive comments on all three of the teams, and then to see this kind of work. Han May addressed a lot of it.
Microphone.
Oh, Han May addressed a lot of my same concerns. One of the things I thought about was when you start expanding the historic district. I'm doing that right now with a community in the Silver Valley, and it gets interesting trying to meet the National Historic Preservation Act, and when you start talking mitigation efforts, but it could be done, and it could actually be done outside of your historic district within the community itself. So that sometimes alleviates some of the concerns, because a lot of times that idea of adding additional historic sites without and potential future disturbances of those buildings can get problematic really quickly. So there's ways to do that without a lot of problems. I did also, talking about the city beach and looking at the redesign. Again, you guys have really put a lot of thought into that, and I appreciate what you've done. And I think Del Hatch and myself both grew up here cruising City Beach when you could actually drive all around it. So there was a road all the way around, kind of a loop. And actually we used to ride on Bridge Street too. And so the idea, somebody, I don't know whether, maybe it was your presentation where you talked about, or somebody talked about cruisers, and it is a historic fact of little small towns that a lot of times you don't have anything to do in the evening, so you drive your car around and you look at things. But it looks like you guys have really started to grab onto that. Seeing the old beach hut, I think you'll have some community pushback on that to take a structure that was built by under the Work Powers Administration. But sometimes the timing is everything, and to properly address that, I think would be great. Good design features too, looking at these islands and a way to try to slow down the mitigation of sand off of the city beach, which is always been something that the bulldozers have to get down there and work with. And maybe this would allow for less intrusive mitigation efforts in the future. So good idea there. The circulation of putting First Avenue down to Superior and the idea of a roundabout there, that is again a great idea. I think, I know in roundabouts have both their proponents and and those who really don't like them, but overall I think that done correctly they can really work, and they really help with flow of traffic. So, but overall, I thought you did a very excellent job of addressing our concerns. So that's all I have for now.
Thanks, Steve. Brian, please.
Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed with the graphic presentation and just the way you addressed all of our concerns in our jury report. I keep looking at the city beach design. I think, most of it really looked really great to me as from a landscape architect's perspective. I just kind of imagine myself walking through that space. I spent a little time there when we were up there in August, but I think, just visually in my head walking through all the paths and just trying to visualize what this place may end up looking like someday. So I think it's kind of really cool. I really like the roundabout down on Superior. when Herb and I drove in, we really didn't feel like we entered Sandpoint until we hit the congested intersection at Bridge Street. You know, we weren't quite sure where to go. So I think that roundabout there might be a really nice place to do, you know, like a welcome to Sandpoint kind of entry for visitors, especially us from the south, you know. So I just thought that was kind of a, you know, bringing that city down a little further to the south. I thought was really good. The phasing plan I really like. I think, you know, breaking it out even further, you know, it helps people, especially the locals, visualize it better. So I think that'll be good. What the concerns I have, I guess, is over this past year or so, I've been spending a lot of time with my elderly mother. She still drives, but also just I've been walking a lot, and just all the things that can trip her up, you know, level changes that are really subtle, you know, dark places in a city, you know, even just right after dark, those type of things. Being able to sit down, you know, closer than younger people think they need to sit. So, you know, I love the urban circulation through this, but also think about how often do elderly people or handicapped people really want to sit down. You know, my back has been out for 6 months and I need to stop fairly frequently to sit. And Lewiston's really horrible about providing places to sit down. So, so I kind of look at that kind of now. Real subtle level changes that aren't lit well at night. I think that's another thing that people, you know, would be really careful of. You know, the dark spots, you know, my mom's got really limited vision now. So, you know, you grab her to stop her from going to a dark area because you can see the level changes that she may not even see. So those are the kind of things I was thinking about. The motorized bicycles are becoming popular here in Lewiston, and they go really, really fast. So I was just curious, you know, how that's going to be addressed, the motorized bicycles versus the pedal only bicycles, you know, what the speed limits are going to be on those, you know, when these shared paths are going through there. What was the cultivation bed? I was kind of curious about that. I guess we could read more about that when we get the report, the final report, but you know, it's kind of an interesting concept. So I was, you know, I'd like to hear more about that. And my other thing is I worked in Flagstaff, Arizona, which gets multiple feet of snow, and watching how the city the landscaping just gets destroyed by snow removal. You know, I know Lewiston, we got hit with a pretty big snowstorm a few years ago. We got like 3 feet. You know, I'm sure you guys must get those occasionally too. So, you know, providing areas where the snow can be removed while also protecting all the landscaping that you've put in. So snow removable areas, I think, is going to be really important. But overall, yeah, I was really impressed and happy with the design. You know, I think I'm looking forward to going back and walking and biking around Sandpoint someday soon. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian. Mayor Shelby.
Thank you, Don. I concur with really, I think virtually all the comments that I heard from my fellow jurors. This is an excellent plan. I thought it was very well presented, visually beautiful. And I also appreciate how you've addressed all of the concerns in detail that we raised after stage 2. But I will echo some particular points here just to get it on the record. Maybe there's a question in here. On the zoning, and I appreciate that you recognized our incentive structure for increased heights downtown. And then I guess I did have a question around the 20-foot setback. So in our existing commercial A zone, the code states that it can be 12-foot setback. I think it's above 35 feet or 10% of the lot width. And what I like about that is it keeps the setback proportional to the scale of the building. And I was wondering what you think about that and why you went with the standard 20-foot, because I'm thinking on a small lot, you know, especially, you know, a small lot, let's say on First Avenue, excuse me, that where you have really limited, very limited space, and you could achieve the same kind of scaling perhaps with a 10% versus a 20-foot. And so if you could comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, Mayor, good point. So our thinking there was in talking to some of the development teams, from a program standpoint, they were bulking up the mass on First to step back for amenities facing the water, right? Natural thing to do. In reality, the height, bulk, and scale issue is not on the Sand Creek side, but it's on the First Avenue side. So 2 attempts with increasing the width of that setback. 3. One, visually, as you see in this modeling, it helped quite a bit and really created that feeling of contextual height, bulk, and scale. 2, it sort of incentivizes bulking up the Sand Creek side a little bit more and balancing some of the setbacks on the First Street side. And the third thing we're thinking as we do a fair amount of this is in order to not have those be basically token walkways or balconies or patios or terraces that are too shallow to be very usable, it allows those step backs to become more animated amenity space up above to support that. So having said all that, what you have and the way you described it works pretty well. So these are just recommendations, and that's our thinking. And so happy to continue to see if it's worthwhile or not, or if you stick with what you have. But that was the reasoning.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Let's see. Yeah, I also really appreciated the thought that you put into the lighting scheme and how you really broke that out and from the different areas and really with significant detail there. I love the concept of the light show as well, and how, especially with the lighting that's available today, how flexible and dynamic you can make that to really kind of fit any occasion. And so I think that's a tremendous opportunity for us here, especially down around the waterfront downtown. You can get all kinds of interesting, a light show can even be more interesting, reflecting off the water and whatnot. I also really appreciated the improvements that you made to the beach circulation plan. Reorienting those parking areas, I think, was brilliant and addressed the bulk of the concerns that we saw there previously. I also appreciate, I also appreciate the roundabout that was accommodated there down at the boat launch as well. For those that kind of get stuck down there, it makes back to the city beach during there. Yeah, that really gives those that kind of, end up in the wrong place a way out, which is critical, especially in a high traffic time down there with big vehicles and trailers and whatnot. Like Steve, I also felt that the removal of Martha's Snack Shack is going to be a challenge, I think, for the community. To give up something like that. I know that we can, tend to be pretty attached to what already exists on the ground, and certainly the city's made investments into that as it stands today. But I also don't think that this plan in any way hinges on that. It would just, we would trade that for some more green space, and it's the community's decision whether or not that's important or not. But I do appreciate the extended green area there, the lawn, if you will. And this was one of my comments after stage 2. I appreciate the concept of the rewilding down at the southeast corner of City Beach. I feel like it's too much, and we already have a very busy, very packed park for 3 months a year, and taking away that much green space is, I think, is going to feel like a loss, and like the park is too crowded for use for much of the year. So I wonder if there's a way to accommodate that concept, but to a lesser degree, maybe keeping more of kind of at the scale of planters along the walkways for the sort of wilded areas, but leaving those sort of larger areas in the middle, allowing those to remain green. So you still get that landscape buffer all around the walking areas and around those lawn areas, but you maintain a lot of that open space that's highly used. And it would still provide the kinds of deterrents that we want for the geese. As we know, our assumption is that having those kinds of barriers, shrubs and bushes and visual obstacles that are, 18 inches and above, maybe a couple feet off the ground, are a great way to deter geese. But when you have large expanses of lawn, let's say, with no obstructions, then that's where the geese will gather. So I think kind of having those pockets that we see, there's like 3 or 4 pockets down in the southeast corner of the City Beach Park. Those could have, larger green areas in the middle, but still accommodate some of that wilded area on the edges and against the paths. And I think we could find a middle ground there to maintain that open space, maintain the geese deterrent to some degree, and still have that kind of rewilding effect that we all also find attractive. I think you're selling yourself short, Katie, on your crazy ideas. I don't think they're crazy at all. I also was thinking about that extending that boardwalk to connect to the levee across the water, and I know that would be quite a costly engineering task to get the height necessary to get over those sailboats passing under there. It would be quite a spectacular monument, really, and connection to really, in a sense, extend the whole park to include the levee and Dock Street over there would be really cool. So I just wanted to put that on record that there is a second on that motion. Let's see. The bike circulation on First Avenue, just a thought here. This has been an ongoing hot button issue since as long as I can remember, how to complete, as long as we've been working on, in a alternative development downtown design. I mean, before this competition, even that issue of bike connectivity on First, connecting Oak Street to Bridge Street, has just been a difficult issue for us as a community. And it occurs to me that, there was such a fight to preserve and even increase parking downtown that with our downtown streets plan, we've created diagonal parking throughout the downtown core. But certainly we could consider 1 lane of parallel parking for that section of First Avenue, and potentially even one block of no parking on one side of the street, and have quite a impressive multimodal facility there, if not even extended, business, what am I trying to say? Kind of a multi-use plaza or patio area for those businesses or cafes along the street there. So I think that's worth considering here, especially as we're discussing the possibility and hopefully entertaining the possibility of a parking garage. We're only talking about maybe, 10 spots or so along the street there that could be, we're going to be building something like 450. So I think that would really go a long way to putting people's concerns at rest around multimodal connectivity along that critical corridor from Oak Street to Bridge Street. And then I also...
Shelby,
yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't want to really bring that up about the parking down there, but when I look at this and then I look at downtown Coeur d'Alene, I mean, they've kept parallel parking, and I always hate to bring up Coeur d'Alene when we're talking about Sandpoint, but you brought it up, so you're the mayor. So, but I think that is really worthwhile looking at, and just it's problematic, always has been, going up that street. So it's a way to get out of the beach on a bike and up through town. Those 3 months of the summer, it would be really nice. So.
Thanks for saying that. And I also am really fond, excuse me, of how you presented extending downtown to the south to Superior with the roundabout and the urban tributary down to that area. I think that's a great concept addition to our master plan here. And those are the specific things I wanted to highlight. But again, I just wanted to commend the team. We really appreciate the tremendous effort and skill and talent that you put behind this. This is a great gift to our community. You have, I think, gone above and beyond what was called for here, and we're greatly appreciative of your effort. Thank you.
Thank you, shall we? Rob, please.
Yeah, hey, how's it going, everybody? I want to, I guess, echo the sentiment of appreciation. I've been impressed with the presentations, how clean they are, how appropriate they are. That gives me a lot of confidence that you're a good partner moving forward to help explain what we're trying to do with other citizens and people in this area. Also, thank you. Impressed with the effort to address our concerns that were brought up at various stages of this. Shows you're listening, and that's one of the biggest things that I think we're looking for in this town as we move forward and look to grow. More specifically, I like the ideas about affordable housing. Seems like there's some work to do there to get the details down, but I like the ideas you bring forward. I appreciate, again, this has been said a few times, but I appreciate the adjustments made at the parking in City Beach. I think that makes flow a lot better. I do have one question there as someone that would possibly be putting on an event at that pavilion. What is the accessibility to the back of the stage, and from a production standpoint, being able to bring in equipment and put on an event, because that's a fairly large field and it would take a good amount of equipment to make that happen. It's not something you want to lug a long ways, and you definitely want to be able to roll it wherever you're getting to.
Rob, right at this point, right here, we wanted to keep the parking for the cars and the beachgoers separate from all of the parking for the trailers and such. So this is not a permanent access that would move through here. This would be a controlled access, bollarded off, so day to day you can't move through there. But during some sort of a presentation, you have a little bit of parking on the back side here to service something happening at this venue. Vehicles could pull in here, and this area, this paved area behind it, is set up extra wide for vehicles that might unload different equipment and things like that. So theoretically, we're looking at sort of a zone right through here that would be accessible for venue use during events.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Something else. The kind of on the same idea is at Farm and Park. Can we go to that and look at the accessibility to the pavilion there?
Yes. Just a second.
So, production, and even in that space, we've got, when we put on an event there, we've got a, 3/4 ton truck with a pulling a 12-foot trailer that pulls up and parks in that area, as well as, the band oftentimes has a 15-passenger van with a trailer it's pulling. So that looks like it might be a challenge. Possibly, could you, what's the access coming in from Main Street there, just north of the pavilion, where those tents are? Would that be yeah.
So that would still be, you could pull cars in through there. We're just showing tents there during like a market situation, but you could certainly get a vehicle in there.
Okay, cool. The roundabout at First and Superior, I really like that idea. I hate that intersection currently, and I like making it a welcoming spot into community. That was whoever brought that up. I like that idea too. I think that was Herb. The angled bridge on Bridge Street, I think that seems like a lofty goal, but you know, with the hole in the ground that's there now, is it a possibility? Because that sure seems like that would take care of a lot of the concerns. You know, I've been in a lot of meetings and committees that really are upset about how to deal with that intersection there between Bridge Street and getting back over to Oak off of First. And, you know, the idea of shutting it down in that area between Bridge and Oak has come up a lot. And First, I know the people on business owners on First Street don't like that idea, rightfully so. Again, like this seems like I haven't seen this idea before, so maybe it has been brought up and maybe it's been squashed, or maybe it's been brought up and just needs to be talked about more. But this looks like a really good idea. As someone that lives in Sandpoint, I like this idea a lot. If it's a possibility, I think we should try to see if we can make that happen. Thank you for that idea. See, going down the list here. Last thing I want to check in about was the traffic patterns. We had there was a couple views on that traffic pattern between Cedar and Pine on 5th Street. And I want to get your opinions on how to deal with a little bit of that, or how that's going to look. So it's yes, that one I think is kind of bringing that into that. The one on the either side has a stoplight. We got a stoplight currently at Cedar and 5th, and then changing that stoplight or changing Pine to 2-way and putting a stoplight on it versus taking up the current bike path with traffic. My question is, how do you anticipate that affecting bike traffic coming into town if we take up that bike path as traffic? How do we anticipate that making a difference and making it harder to walk, putting up a barrier? To me, the two different lanes seems like a barrier to pedestrian traffic, as opposed to having one. Yeah, that right there seems like a barrier to pedestrian traffic compared to the other opportunity. We only have to cross one road.
Yeah.
We lose parking by taking up that, turning that into 2-lane. I mean, it just seems like a lot of, so again, going back to my questions, do you see that as an impediment with pedestrian traffic? Do you see that as that figure 23 as how do we modify the bike lanes to make it work? Otherwise, you mean you're taking a bike path basically, or you're putting it right in the parking lot. Sorry, taking up parking spaces. So yeah, I'll let you answer those questions.
Yeah, this is Phil. I'll answer that. You know, that couplet feature is a vehicle centric feature, which I think ITD brought that forward, and there's some history about when the streets were reverted back to the city, some of the other streets. That was a method to move traffic through the town, but it puts the vehicle first and the pedestrians and the bikes probably third or fourth, because the vehicle's probably first, second, and then it pushes them down. We would encourage, if it's feasible, that the city take another look at eliminating that and not doing that curve project, because it has a lot of great qualities for all the reasons you described. But I think that there's some history that would need to be investigated, and if that's even feasible to divert from the current plan of having that curve in there. But we believe it would be much better. I think the whole team believes it would be much better for the Granary District, the adjoining property owners, the downtown, the broader city population, if the vehicle was not in first place in that section of the world.
Okay. And you, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not seeing your face. That's what I recognize. You're the one that has experience with traffic flow and all that stuff.
Yeah, our firm does.
Yeah.
Yep.
How much do you see that figure 23 increasing traffic flow for the automobile? Because it feels like to me, as someone doesn't have the experience, but it seems like to me it doesn't increase automobile traffic as much as it decreases foot and bike traffic.
And you would have to study that. And I mentioned traffic modeling earlier to get to the bottom of the proposed improvements on First Street south of Pine, in the roundabout. There would be traffic modeling. In that same traffic modeling effort, you could start to dig into the impacts of not doing that curve project for vehicles. And that would be really where you would get at that, Rob, is doing the traffic modeling to understand the impacts. And then, it boils down to trade-offs on a lot of these things. It could have an impact, and maybe your level of service goes from C to D, and the city says, we're completely fine with D. But ITD may say, well, we're not fine with D. So there's some interagency, city, state government things that would need to go through. But you would start with traffic modeling to get to the bottom of your question, to answer your question.
Okay. Thank you very much for answering that. Okay. And again, I want to thank y'all very much for the work that you've done. And I look forward to seeing this and being a part of seeing this unfold.
Don, can I interject one more comment?
I think those sons, when they are 12 and 16, will say, Daddy did a good deal.
Hey, Don, if you don't mind, I'd like to just interject one more comment. I also wanted to comment on that bridge, and I spaced it. Rob, I agree with your comments. I think that alternative alignment with Church Street would solve a lot of the problems that we see continuously with pedestrians, bikes, cars, connectivity through downtown coming off of Highway 95. I mean, it just solves so many problems, not to mention the challenge that we're going to have in replacing that bridge at all is going to be a real difficulty, and just creating a new bridge beside the bridge is a fantastic solution. So it really solves a lot of problems. And just for the record, this was something that we discussed internally a couple of years ago, but it was determined that just the cost would be a lot for the city to bear with already an expensive project. But here we are, looking, this is a whole new paradigm we're faced with right now. And now we're creating a funding mechanism to be able to support this downtown master plan. So I think relooking at something like this is absolutely feasible. And when I think about, one opportunity that the city has here, if there were to be something like a land swap where, here we are taking, a significant, basically a parcel of land there where the new bridge would be located, could be traded for the right of way above the existing Bridge Street there. And there could be air rights for, a development that happens above that space. It could actually be something close to an even swap, conceivably. So I think that would be a great way for the city potentially to offset that cost a little bit of acquiring the new parcel of land there. And I think, it's definitely worth taking another look at. So thank you for bringing attention to that. A couple of you did mention the bridge realignment there.
Thank you, Shelby. I need to move on. Karen.
Yes, well, I too want to thank the team. Very solid presentation, and want to thank you for being responsiveness to our input and requests. Much appreciated. Some of this stuff has already been touched on, so I think I can speed through my comments or questions. Like everybody else, a historic district expansion I was clamoring for before you got to it. but I too, like everyone else, am concerned about any restrictions, any future restrictions that would come along with it. And I know that's going to be taken care of. In the world of the ecology, I wanted to compliment you on the combination of creativity and utility around the cliffstone seating. I thought that was a very clever and utilitarian thing. The only thing I think it's going to happen is that it'll become so popular that there will be a certain group of people, any group of people, who probably love it so much that they'll want to be the owners of the space forever. So you're going to have to figure out a management plan. I was on the workforce housing caught with two things. One was the integration. I think it was somebody else. I think it was on May who talked about integrating. And I think that that is kind of a lesson learned by many communities. So I would like to reinforce another look there. And the other thing is, I know that that the sort of the development from the private sector has been has had a lot of energy, if not urgency, associated with it, and that's been a key consideration. I'm just wondering if, in the conversations that Don has referred to about meeting with some of the developers, if his indication or somebody's indication that there might be a partnership out there for workforce housing might not be registered at this early time. And I also think that it would seem to me that there would be some existing data that would show the influx of seasonal workers. When do they get here? How long do they stay here? What kind of accommodations do they need? Because you've got a very integrated or active or consolidated community there that I would think that that 200 number could be verified pretty quickly. Similarly, and complementary to what I see in a very cohesive community, city and community there, and I think I've heard it registered here about the bicycle. You've got a new plan, but in Portland, bicyclists have opinions on exactly how they want to move around the community. So I would urge you to make sure that you have either looked at other inputs that they've had and or ask their opinions solidly about this recommendation that you're making. I was an early advocate to add a lighting concept to this overall plan. And I just think that you hit the nail on the head in about three different ways. One, I love the understanding that you know that lighting can be customizable. That's a big $20 word, but I just know that it has so much potential, and the fact that you recognize it right out. Number two, that you recognize it as a storytelling opportunity. And three, the light show that you showed in the winter with all of the other comments that have been put out there already. One that hasn't been added is, because I've done this work myself, it's pretty low cost entertainment activity. And I don't know too many people who don't thrill at the opportunity to participate in both regular and spectacular light shows. So I think very nice job of understanding exactly what you're doing with this lighting framework plan. The city beach, that was one of my inputs also, and I think that there has been great improvement in reconfiguring the boat and car parking. I do think that the general circulation still has a couple of question marks. So I would conclude with, it's not quite finished, but that's a direct quote from you. So I don't think I have to urge you to keep looking. I think you're going to do that on your own. And the final thing is, what I loved about the bridge concept in the first place was how it tied to everything about Sandpoint that I've come to know, and the fact that you respect what your history is, and you like using your history for reminding people why they live, work, and play there. So I think further positive thinking is good. Further ideas will be thrown at the wall to see if anything sticks. And I think that this bridge is really also the bridge to the future of Sandpoint. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Karen. For everyone, we've gone beyond, but I think the point at this part of the process is that the jury's comments here are ways for the city to continue to evaluate this plan. I would go back to what we started with here is our design program that we gave the competitors with some very specific design goals. Those 11 design goals are create a holistic framework, incorporate nature, 3, protect and enhance the water, 4, acknowledge the tribe's unique relationship with Sandpoint, 5, celebrate Sandpoint's history, 6, enhance year-round recreation, 7, integrate art and increase experiences and attractions, 8, generate economic development opportunities, 9, connect and provide access to attractions, 10, recognize the need for resiliency in design and development, and 11, build on the community's input to address the area in whole. As our process has evolved, we have become a lot more detailed, I would say, in what this plan is doing, but I would go back to saying this is not the kind of final adopted plan, but this is an overall framework by which the various projects within Sandpoint can be identified and how they may all eventually tie together. With that, what I'm going to do is kind of adjourn this particular session. I want to thank the design team for their diligence, their innovativeness, and their openness to suggestions. And the jury will meet after this to put together some final comments. Our next point in this process is to have the team make their presentation to City Council. And that is currently scheduled on October 18th. With that, I will adjourn this session and want to thank the team very, very much. I want to thank the jury very, very much for their thoughtful comments. We will convene again in 10 minutes and on a different address. Thank you all.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you all.